NetBrain 202. So say reload, or make this multi-string, reload reason. Okay, so that's all I'm going to define for this example. Now, if I was doing this for real, we want, again, one parser file per output per operating system. So it's very important that we define everything when we're doing this for real. Can the parser compute a value of multiple values into one variable? No, you would do that inside the adaptive automation. You would take the values and you would composite them there in the automation. And in particular, that's more of a QApp thing, I would say, generally. Very good question. But yeah, so this is just defining the raw materials, and then those materials, so we're just defining how to gather the information in a parser file. We're not manipulating it, except the only real way we can manipulate it is with search and replace. So if we needed to do that for some reason to make the output work properly, we could do that, but we should save any manipulation of this data beyond what's absolutely necessary to make the parsing work. We should save that for the adaptive automation, because first of all, that's where it occurs in the workflow. But secondly, this way, the raw material can be taken and then manipulated in as many different ways as needed for different scenarios. So, all right, so now let's go ahead and save this. Now for parser files, there is a very specific recommended naming syntax, which is the syntax of the show command or the SNMP or whatever, and then in brackets, the name of the operating system or third-party system. So Cisco iOS in this case. Now, again, the reason I specify Cisco is there's like 3 different things that call themselves iOS across many different parts of IT, but I always like to be clear. So that's my OCD at work. And there we go. All right, so that is variable parsing or keyword parsing, depending on what you want to call it. Any questions about anything we've talked about thus far?
So one more question here on paste, because I'm on a HIQA switch 1. If you just do version parsing, you'll have 2 lines, right? So it goes line 1 will take the first match and line 2 will take the second match?
No. So if both of these can match the same line, the same section of text. So
which one takes precedence, first or second match?
Neither. They'll both. They're not mutually exclusive. Each line is a separate operation.
Okay.
And so, like I said, if I wanted, I could have my multi-string here, and then I could have a whole series of patterns to find integer matches to individual possible variables, and they would all work. So if we have a situation where we've got multiple lines that are very similar, we need to give it enough information to distinguish between, especially if we want to find the second line, we need to give it enough information to make sure it finds the correct one and not just the first one. So bear that in mind. And this is where doing text parsing and then parsing within that can sometimes be necessary. Although rather than doing that, there is, again, in Visual Parser, we can put a start line. So we can say it'll only start looking for a match after this point, or it'll stop looking for a match at this point, and we can establish patterns for that purpose. We can also put replacement rules in the parsing as well, and these are available for all parsing methods. I forgot to mention that, so thank you. I should also mention there, if we click help, there's a wonderful, wonderful single sheet reference guide here, and they're for specific methods and so forth. And then if you go into the online help, there's full chapter and verse in there. All right, great question. So any others before we move on? All right. So next, we're going to do paragraph parsing. So new parser. And we're going to this time do show interface. Same guy. Here we go. So we're going to qualify this again to switch and router. And we're going to say paragraph. Now with paragraph, what we're doing is we're establishing an identification line pattern. And note that there can be multiple different paragraph patterns in the same output. It's not like we're limited to having one type of parsing per parser file. We can do different things as needed. So for example, let's take show IP BGP summary. That would have variable parsing at the beginning for the device level variables, and then there's a table below that. So we would then have a table parser as well. So anyway, so within the paragraph parser, there's the ID line pattern, which is looking to identify the line or lines that start each paragraph. So how do we tell one paragraph from another? We can have multiple lines that work together and all have to be matched, but usually we just have the single line. So we're going to select the header row of one of our interface paragraphs here, copy it over, and then the interface name, so $INTF, could be up, could be down, could be administratively down. So let's say interface underscore status, and actually I just realized I need to make this a multi-string. And then the line protocol could be up, could be down, could be admin down, or whatever else. So mstring line status. So there we go. And so not only do we have these variables in the line, but we now have the start of each paragraph, as we see. How cool is that? So now we are establishing variable line patterns. They're just like the variable line patterns we did before, but now they're going to be analyzed in each paragraph in turn. So for the examples that we're going to be using in NetBrain 202, last input and last output, I don't think the spaces at the beginning of the line really matter, but I like to take them out, again, being OCD. I don't know if that, when in doubt, multi-string, basically. So let's see. And I am aware that I should be defining how many minutes as the input rate as a variable, but for simplicity here, for this example, I'm just doing integer input bits. So this actually, if I know that all the iOS devices in my environment are only ever going to be reporting a 5-minute input rate, because that's how I've set it up, for example, it is perfectly acceptable to parse it like this. Again, as long as it's going to work reliably and consistently at all times in your environment, go for it. So. And then so when parsing, this is a great opportunity to take your phone off the hook, get a nice cup of coffee, put on a podcast or some nice music. And, it's not all that complicated, but it does take a while once you get into it, because there's just usually in any given output, there's just a lot of stuff to do. So, and any excuse to take your phone off the hook, right? And for the last two, I'm going to just type. I'm not going to copy paste, partly to save time and partly just to show you that you can. So I'm going to say int input error. And you see, we get a match. And then likewise for output errors. So there we go. So again, for this example, I'm just parsing specifically what I need. But if I was doing this for real, we would want this one parser file for the whole output for this operating system, and everybody in the organization would be fixing to use this. So I would want to parse everything So let's go ahead and save this. And show interface for Cisco iOS. There we go. All right. So questions about anything we've talked about up to this point? All right. So now, finally,